A conversation with Pop Tot.
So apparently they're going to reboot Star Trek The Next Generation. Not really, though. That's apparently not really.
Okay.
It's super clickbait.
Well, I mean, the recent interview with Brent Spiner is probably where you're getting this from. And I don't know, has there been anybody else that's talked about it? Or is this just the only thing that's come out of it in the last 6 months or a year?
I think they were trying to get some buzz from him and try to be like, yeah, say something about Star Trek. And he was just like, oh, yeah, like he's probably just talking out the side of his ass. I think he's going off the fact that he liked the new recent movies and Star Trek has become so prominent. Now we have Lower Decks, Picard. We have the Kelvin new movies that are out that they've kind of failed but kind of brought back.
Disco.
And Discovery, obviously. And so Star Trek is very prominent, probably the most prominent it's been since the 90s, which is crazy.
Yep.
And now he's talking about doing a reboot. And obviously, at least in my end, I'm like, no, don't do that. Please do not do that.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
It's kind of weird because I didn't feel that way. Did you feel that way about the Kelvin movies?
Well, no, but you're talking about, what, 40, 50 years difference between the original series and the Kelvin movies. It's almost like the actors that were in the Next Generation are, I mean, they're older. They're much, much older, obviously, by Picard. They're not like, in their 70s and 80s, or in some cases there are. I don't know. I think there was 50 years and you could recast them.
Right.
But if Next Generation, and at least in my mind, I'm not that old, I'm not that young, it would be hard to recast them right now. I mean,
they're talking about doing it, and I guess it kind of almost sounded like he was talking about doing it in a movie fashion and going from there.
Right.
And it's just one of those things, like you said, it's been 30 years almost since The Next Generation was on TV, but a lot of those stories are so relevant today. And I guess they were in the original series, but like you said, back then, 50 years ago, it was like taboo and all that when Kirk kissed Uhura. Like, it was so groundbreaking. And now that's more commonplace. That's not really like, wow, that's so groundbreaking. Should be very normal now.
The problem I have with reboots these days is the reboots for the sake of reboots.
Yeah.
But there has been some stories where there's a story still left to tell.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Or a new story in, current climate. Because Star Trek's always been about social climate. So is there a new story to tell that you can tell the Next Generation with those characters?
And I guess that would be my thing, is if you're going to approach it, are you approaching it because you see $ Star Trek? Or are you approaching it because you're like, we need to use Star Trek to tell relevant stories about today? Then I'd be like, okay, maybe I can see that. But even then, it's like, just go with another crew.
Would you reboot it in the way they rebooted Discovery in the Star Trek universe, where like Next Generation now is not so much the wood swoop and the bridge. Now it's like the Flash with the lens flare and all that stuff with the see-through panels? Or would you see? That's what I'm like. The definition of a reboot. What timeline is it going to be? When Picard takes the Enterprise D, are they going to screw with the design of the Enterprise D?
That's where you start getting to the sacred ground, is when you start editing and modifying things. And people alone were so passionate about what JJ did with the original Enterprise. You go and mess with the RVs of spaceships, then I think people are going to be really upset with what you're doing. I think the interesting part about Picard and about Discovery, and both, again, it's attached to the Kelvin universe, is Kurtzman. And I feel like they probably could have bailed themselves out with Discovery and Picard if they just attached it to that alternate universe. And that's where I think, to go back to The Next Generation, where that could have worked. But they kind of bailed on the Kelvin universe.
Right. And they said the fourth movie is never going to get off the ground now.
But then I saw an article that said it was going to happen. So I don't know. And it's like, I think maybe Brent Spiner might be saying this from a place of like, stop asking me. I'm done. I don't want to put the makeup on anymore. I'm old. Like, let me write some books and make some hilarious Twitter jokes and, offhand jokes and leave me alone.
then it's like there's just not a compelling enough story for me for these people to fill out. And it's, if you change that iconic bridge and you try to, J.J. Abrams it up, or you start adding lens flare and all this,
getting away from the family yacht. I don't know.
To do that to the next generation would really suck.
I definitely, obviously, very much respect Brent Spiner for all that he's done with the character, and the guy seems like a lovely dude. But his name has also been attached to some things that make me very much question his ability to write and create stories. And I mean, he was one of the chief reasons why Data became so prevalent in the movies. And a lot of people kind of recreate their view of Data in the Next Generation. Data was never he's almost like a main character in the movies. And then he becomes, it's like he wasn't like a main character in the show. And he became literally everything in those movies revolves around Data and Picard. And the point I'm making is I don't necessarily think you can just go off what Brent Spiner is saying, even though I think it was just a pull quote. And I know we're making a whole long video off that. Welcome to YouTube. I'm sorry if you're offended, but it's just weird. If he's the problem I have is if Brent Spiner, who is not Mr. Moneybags, he's not a corporate suit. If he's thinking this, a corporate suit has thought this. So the idea is probably already in motion somewhere.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
So it's either going to bounce in our face and it's going to be like how we felt when Heath Ledger was picked as the Joker, or it's going to be how we felt what's-his-face was picked as the Joker. It's like...
Right. Or even recently, people have been hitting on me because of Ahsoka. And I had, because in my Clone Wars video, I mentioned how I was not really looking forward to a live-action Ahsoka because I'm not really sure how they would do it. People are like, whoa, you got that wrong. And it's like, okay, you got me. You got one. Okay, you got one. And Heath Ledger, you got two. But
a lot of people, there's probably no bigger fan of Ahsoka Tano than me. It's one of the many reasons I love the Clone Wars.
Best new character.
But I think everybody around me was surprised that I wasn't overwhelmed by Rosario Dawson. And I love the actress and I love the part. I'm not saying that. There wasn't tears streaming down my face that I was that excited to see her on the screen. And I just I don't know why. It's just maybe the build up to it. I was more excited to see Katie as Bo-Katan.
Yeah.
So,
and I guess I would probably feel the same way about Star Trek. I'm sure they would probably use the same music cues and some things that you would remember or be familiar. But ultimately, I would know in my heart it's not the same the Next Generation. And therefore, with that mindset, I'm like, then what's the point? There's just no point. If you're just making money, then create something new. Tell a new story.
I would say leave it as it is, at least until I got one foot in the grave, because it just I don't see it right now. I'm not a fan of it. It's something I still bring up on TV and watch every once in a while and find my favorite episodes.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm not a fan of the idea.
I'm not either. And honestly, let's just leave it the way it is.